welcome back to Raw Thoughts. I just want to thank everybody for continuing to come back to listen and to liking and following Raw Thoughts podcast. Today, I have a very dear friend of mine, actually my sister's best friend. I've known her since I was a child. Church camp, and she was a counselor for us, and just all the walks of life with Veronica Schmidt. And to tell you a little bit about her background, she talks about, recovering from trauma. She's going to talk to us a little bit more about mental health advocacy, about the sober life. So Veronica, tell us about you.
Yeah, this is so exciting. I was doing the math. I've met you when you were 10.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
20 years ago.
20 years. And that's crazy because I can't be much older than 20. But yeah, so I grew up out here really close, like right down the road from you. I mean, we carpooled your sisters to school. And, I'm here to kind of tell you about, like you said, mental health and recovering from trauma and stuff like that. So probably should start out and just like trigger warning. We're going to talk about some heavy shit. And, if anybody listening, if you're not in the right mental space to listen to some of that, maybe just know what you're getting into. But just the world loves a great comeback story, right? And so I could tell you one of those stories about a 17-year-old girl who, was sexually abused and going through undiagnosed bipolar disorder, suicidal ideation, drug problem, and then now fast forward to, 33, family, great marriage, 2 kids, great career, high school dropout too at 17, and, now have 2 math degrees and great career and treated for mental health and just thriving. And I could tell you this nice story that starts at A and then ends at B and is all good, but that's not the story I want to tell.
Yeah.
I want to tell about all the stuff in between, that messy middle, and the still going, right? Like, there is no point A to point B, and then you're just fixed, right?
Right.
And so, I grew up really religious, and there's this notion of a testimony, right? You didn't have a relationship with God and your life was a mess, but then you found the Lord and now your life's good, right? And so that's kind of how I grew up, thinking about life. And then when my life didn't go that way, it was really, really confusing.
Yeah.
And then just self-help books too. There's so many out there, and there's so many great stories, memoirs, my favorite types of books to read. They're usually a mess and then growth and then now we're good. And it's that happily ever after that you don't see that people continue to fall down. And that's what I call it, not my comeback story, my fall down story.
Yeah.
Because I continuously fall down. And admittedly, sometimes it takes me a really, really, really long time to get up. From 17 to 33, I've been down more than I've been up.
But the greatest thing, Veronica, is that you do continue to get back up.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people, there isn't an A to B. Mm-hmm. And it is very rocky and it's very rough. And sometimes we are down more than we are up. But the fact that you continue to get up is what a lot of people don't talk about. And a lot of people don't talk about that middle messy aspect of life. They just say, hey, I was in a rough situation, but now I'm better, and here's my story, like you talked about.
Yeah, exactly.
And you knew my vision of this podcast of no, let's talk about that section of life where most people don't want to talk about.
Yes.
Somehow I'm good at bringing that out, and you knew that, and you reach out to me. I mean, the very first instance when you saw this come up and you're like, I want to tell my story. I want to speak on it.
Yeah.
And I really commend you for coming on here, and especially, I mean, for the listeners, I got a phone call from you earlier today in tears and I'm not gonna be able to do this. I've got stuff going on. I said, Veronica, it's okay. That's what life does. Yeah. And not being upset and not being, that's going to ruin the schedule or anything like that. It's me knowing, hey, you need time for you and you need that space for yourself.
Yeah, and apparently I needed 1 hour because I texted you later. I was like, did you cancel it yet? Because actually I'm good now. So yeah, take it day by day. I take it like minute by minute. Like earlier this morning I was like, my life is terrible. And then now I'm like, oh, I'm good. I'd like to still do this.
So tell us, I mean, what was 17 like? Like that seems like that's really where it all started and that's where you have, come to now. But like, what was 17 like for you?
Yeah. So I'll back up just a little bit. Like you've known me since I was 14. And if you looked at my life 0 to 17, it would paint a really idyllic picture, right? Grew up extremely wealthy. My parents are still together, went to church and kind of had one of those like snapshot, really like, okay, lives.
Right. Everybody wanted to be like you.
I don't know about that.
I mean, even in high school, right? Like they're like, oh, the Verheys have this and they have this. And like everybody wanted that.
Yeah.
Like that is the picturesque, but you never know what's going on more than that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, but I mean, like, I had it easy. Like, I really did. You look at other people's lives. It's like I had it pretty easy. And then 17 rolled around and got in a bad relationship, and that kind of started just like a spiral. And not just the bad relationship, but as I alluded to earlier, I have been diagnosed now 3 years ago with bipolar type 2. And it usually starts to manifest 18 to 20 years old. So not only was I kind of going through and just normal high school 17-year-old girl shit, like, oh my God, don't take nobody wants to go back to 17 as a female, right? So like normal life stuff and a bad relationship and starting to have some of this more mental health stuff popping up. Long story short, I was sexually assaulted, moved to a different country for my own safety, dropped out of high school. And so it went from very quickly my life being this idyllic, I also figure skated competitively for 12 years, really motivated person, really sure of herself, had a plan, straight A student, to all of a sudden living in another country without anybody that I knew, not being able to talk to anybody, not really understanding what just had happened to me, dealing with mental health issues, and really alone. It really just changed, that really changed my life, right? And I got really, really depressed and, diagnosed later with post-traumatic stress disorder and something I'm still dealing with. And it got so bad that I developed a dissociative disorder too, and actually dissociative amnesia. So I don't even remember 12 to 18 months of my life. I have very, very few memories of 17 to 19 years old, which is really crazy, scary too.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, a lot of things changed, and I got really depressed. I came back to the U.S., and I slept a lot, and I blamed it on jet lag for as long as I could. But really, I was just really depressed. And I wouldn't say I was necessarily suicidal then, but I definitely didn't want to do life. But I was just, too apathetic to do anything about it. So I would just lay there, and I would sleep all day, and then I'd stay up all night. And was not a very productive member of society for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long were you in that other country for?
I think 4 months.
Okay, so not a whole long.
Not a whole lot of time. Yeah. And I tried to do online school there, and then again, all I did was sleep. I didn't know the language. I didn't know anybody, and so I never adjusted to the time, nor did I try to. I just slept a lot.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a lot of times depression, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, the fact of even getting up and brushing your teeth when you're in a depressive state is like, that is a freaking win.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
And
there are so many days that I'm like, what did you do today? I showered, and that was the most productive thing I've done in a week.
Yeah.
You know?
So coming back, 19, what did that look like for you?
Well, so I don't remember a lot, but then I started partying really hard because, what else would you do? If I'm going to, get up and shower and get dressed, I'm going to go out, right? So started partying a lot, got into drugs. And then I honestly this is going to sound terrible, but almost brought me brought me back to life.
Yeah.
In a bad sense though, right?
Yeah.
Like kind of wake up and then you're in this nightmare instead of doing anything productive. And that lasted a few months, luckily only a few months. And then one day I had something kind of scary happen and was just like, looked in the mirror and took a good long look at myself. I'm like, look at your life, look at your choices. If you're going to live, right, which we've already decided, I guess that's what we're doing here. This isn't how we want to do it. And
right.
also, really, really fresh after the trauma and just thinking, I don't want this person to steal any more of my life than he already took from me.
Yeah.
And so I woke up one day and I was like, I'm never doing that again. Moved to California with my cousins to just kind of get away from the party scene. I was there not very long, and I decided to come back and go to therapy and start going back to church. And so that was my first, I did it. I stood back up, right? I was depressed. I couldn't get out of bed. Then I started doing drugs. And now look at me. I got a job. I'm back. I'm doing therapy. I'm back in church. This is my testimony. I'm done. I did it.
Right.
This is my comeback story.
You're like, that's your A to B.
There we go. It was so perfect, Mackenzie. And then real life still happens, though, right? So.
And what was real life after that? I mean, you started going to therapy. You had a job. You were working on yourself.
Yeah. And then in therapy, we talked about the depression and all this stuff and got diagnosed with PTSD, which the solution or I'm trying to think of the word, but the regimen for helping with that, I guess, is
kind of the diagnosis and
there's no magic pill you can take for PTSD. It really is therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like if you're depressed, there's medication. If you have an anxiety disorder, there's medication. Bipolar, I'm on a lot of medication, but for PTSD, there's not really medication for that. So it's therapy. Right. And I finished therapy way too soon. Oh, but my point there was I was diagnosed with PTSD, but a lot of my bipolar symptoms had already been starting to show at that point, but they were hidden by this trauma. And so even going to therapy and seeing a psychiatrist was not diagnosed at that point.
Because you weren't going for that problem.
Exactly.
You were going for a specific problem to deal with that. And that can happen a lot of times.
It does, yeah.
It gets masked underneath something else where you think you're trying to fix this one problem.
Yeah.
But there's roots and there's things down deeper of what the actual, not the actual problem, but something adding to the problem.
Another problem,
yeah.
Right? They're compounding effects there.
Yeah.
And so I finished therapy and thought I was all good and healed. And then I went to a Bible college. I was trained to be a missionary. And so, I'm got a testimony. I'm doing good. I'm going to go be a missionary. And then I'm not kidding you, maybe 3 weeks before I was set to leave to go and spend 6 months in Romania. And I had already gone on a shorter summer mission to Romania. And so I was going to go back. And 3 weeks before I was supposed to go, I was like, no, I'm not going. Something in my gut was just this isn't what I'm supposed to do.
Which is crazy because you're supposed to be following the Lord. You're supposed to be following God.
But I did feel that God told me not to do it. And so I ended up actually kind of sidetracked. I converted to Catholicism. I was in an evangelical church and then I converted to Catholicism and really felt like that's what I was supposed to do. And and then I was good. But I dropped out of, so I didn't go on this mission. Then I went back to college. In the middle of all of this, I was like also trying to go to college at some points, and I would do like really, like I said, I was a straight A student, so I would do so good one semester, and then the next semester I would just fail out. And then I couldn't hold a job down for really long either, and like relationships, like I thought I would never be able to like actually have a serious relationship again, just because I was just like too broken from that
Right.
trauma. So
So you went back to college.
yeah, I went back. So I went back to college. This was like, I think this was only my second time going back. Yeah, did summer school, did really, really good in summer school, and then started going in the fall. And like 2 weeks in, I was just like, I'm done. Like, I can't do it. Like, I just dropped out again. But I'd always do it, like, I'd always decide that I was done, like, after the actual dropout period, so then I'd just get Fs. So I have, like, a bunch of Fs on my transcript, but then I'd retake the classes they got off my transcript. I still graduated cum laude after being a high school dropout, so I'm pretty proud of that.
You've done amazing.
Thank you. So I went back to college, and then I dropped out, and then I started partying again. No drugs, thank God. I've been able to
Stay off of those.
That is the one thing where, you know, I fall back down again, but I've never gotten back into drugs, so that's grateful
And
for
it's
that.
even if you fall back down each time, you're not falling as far as the time before.
It really, yes. Sometimes it sure feels like it. I've gotten a lot better at getting back up, especially in the last 4 years. I've gone to a lot of therapy in the last 4 years, like a lot.
Yeah.
And I can see now every time that you fall down, I think I'm never going to get out of this, and I'm going to be here forever. And it is always either a little bit shorter or not quite as far. And so I can now see the trajectory of it getting easier, where before, I don't know, it's supposed to be, you're supposed to be like healed from this one thing, and maybe you fall down, but you better fall down in a different area because you were supposed to fix this other thing. And I kept falling down in the same areas. Like I dropped out of school, I think 3 times, and I quit my jobs sporadically, like 6 times or something like that, and would just kind of go back into these old habits of partying a lot, or being really depressed, or being like mean to my family and things like that. And I would just keep going back to that and not understanding why I couldn't get better for longer term, right?
So when did you start feeling like you were getting better and not doing that?
Well, let's see. I still think I'm doing that. I'll let you know. Let's have this conversation again in 10 years, and I'll tell you, maybe. No, I still think I make the same mistakes over and over again, right? But different. They have evolved, right? I'm not in my 20s anymore. I'm, a mom to 2 kids, and actually, that's really what happened. And so, college. I think round 3 of college. No, I wasn't even going to college at the time. I was trying to get back. I was working really hard, saving money, try to go back to college, and then I get pregnant. At 23 years old, I get pregnant, and with a guy that I had been friends with for a really long time. We dated when we first met. We're friends with. We just started dating, and I instantly get pregnant. So we're like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Who is now my husband for 9 years.
Wow.
So, I mean, it worked out. I think 9 years. But anyways, so I get pregnant, and I'm like, okay, now I have to get my life together. I can no longer just quit my jobs when I don't want to go in. I have to graduate college. Like, that was the thing for me. I was like, this will be my 3rd time going back to college. I have to graduate college. I don't want my daughter's mom to be a high school dropout, and that's
Right.
it. Like, that can't be my story.
Right.
So I went back to college, and I did probably 3 years worth of college in 2 years with a newborn baby. Ended up graduating with a 2-year-old and 15 weeks pregnant with my son.
Wow.
And I I don't know if you remember, but my pregnancies are horrific. I had hyperemesis, and I threw up every single day of my pregnancies. My kidneys started failing. Like, my pregnancies were so bad. And so to be able to graduate with a 2-year-old being sick, I would take one of my professors let me do take-home tests instead of like, they were always open books, so she let me take them home because I was having to do them in the hospital plugged into IVs.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
And so I went from this like, oh, I'm too tired today, I'm going to drop out of college person to I'm so committed to this that I'm taking take-home tests in the hospital.
What made you, besides your daughter, what was that switch in your mind where you're like, I have to do this. Like, this is what I want.
Yeah.
I'm continuing to go forward, because it could have been very easy for you to drop out again when you are in the hospital like that and kind of make that your excuse.
Oh, yeah. I had plenty of valid reasons to either drag college on or, I mean, I could have just dropped out and been a stay-at-home mom, and like, my husband had a great job as an engineer, like, would have been fine. But I didn't want to disappoint him. I didn't want to disappoint my daughter. Not that she would have been disappointed, not that either of them would have been disappointed with me, but I really didn't want to disappoint myself anymore. I wanted that girl who woke up every morning at 4 a.m. to go figure skate before school, who also got straight A's, who had big dreams. I wanted to make her proud again. And I hadn't been making her really proud.
Yeah.
I just felt like I owed it to myself. I really kind of, that same moment where I looked in the mirror and was like, I'm not going to be a drug addict. I'm not going to do that. That's not my story. Kind of, found out I was pregnant with my daughter. Instantly call your sister. She's like, congratulations. I was like, no, we are not. No,
we're not celebrating on this one.
Not yet. Eventually celebrated, but it's like, no. But I just didn't want my story to end there. I didn't want to be a high school dropout who got knocked up in college, who then
didn't go anywhere in life.
And I mean, I could have still, having a loving family, I think, is the most important. And if at the end of the day, no matter what I do, if my kids know that they are loved, that's all that's important, no matter if I'm a high school dropout or a drug addict or not. Not that, no. I mean, you can't really, anyway, that's table that. But, no matter what accomplishments I do, the only thing that really matters is if my kids know that they're loved by me. And, but I felt like I owed it to myself, right? Like, this can't be the end of my story. Yeah. And I've gone through enough things that I've thought were the end of my story. When I was sexually assaulted, I thought this was the end of my story, right? When I started doing drugs, I'm like, this is the end of my story. And then I was like, wait, no, it doesn't have to be. I had some really terrible stuff happen at 29 years old, and thought then, this is the end of my story. And those are my fall downs, right? Where I'm just like, this is it. Like, this is the end of my story. This is what my life is like. And then every once in a while, I'll just look in the mirror and think, no, it's not. No, it's not. And it's almost, I look back now and I talk to like my prior self, right? Like, I go and look at that 17-year-old who couldn't get out of bed and was just so broken, and think, no, just get up, you can do it, And it's almost like my future self is like guiding me to be able to do that. I actually call it like light switches. After having a traumatic experience, you almost like get in this cave and this darkness, and every once in a while a light will just flip on, and I see for the first time and like think, oh, I can do this, right? And then you think you're healed, but then you realize that you've just been getting used to living in the dark. And then all of a sudden you'll see the next light switch and you can turn that one on. And that's that comebacks piece, right, where you can keep turning on these light switches and feeling better and growing and healing. But then all of a sudden, like, a light bulb over here will go out. And you're like, wait, no, I have to go back and I have to fix this light bulb. So, so those were a few moments of, like, I'm not going to do drugs anymore. I'm going to go back to college. I'm not going to let my daughter, I'm not going to disappoint my daughter, but really I'm not going to disappoint myself. And then ever since then, I've been able to hold down a job.
Which you have a fantastic job,
yes,
and you love it. And I do remember one phone call that you had given my sister, and you were crying. And
that's surprising.
Right. Like, I've known you for a long time, and it's always one of those, like, oh, what's Veronica going through now?
Right.
You know, like, not only recovering from a lot of things, but then just life happening is like, oh my gosh, can this girl get a break? You know, like, looking on the outside and looking in onto your life. And that is some aspects of life. I mean, you're there for a lot of your family members, and that's where some of the trauma also comes from. Yeah. But I just remember my sister getting a phone call from you, and you're bawling, and she's like, Veronica, what's the matter? Like, where are you? What can I help with? Like, and kudos to my sister. She has, you're her best friend, right?
I know,
like, you have a great group of friends.
We do.
Super amazing. And she finally gets it out of you that, like, you got 100% on your math test.
I'm a crier. Happy tears, sad tears, scared tears, joyful, like, any emotion is going to come right out my eyeballs.
And she's like, okay, good. Nothing's wrong. Like, we're good. Okay. Veronica's crying because she, got 100% on her test.
Yes. I'm definitely always an all or nothing person. Like, when I am in college, like I said, I graduated cum laude. When I finally did graduate, I got, like, would get straight A's a few semesters in a row, and then, like, those B's were like, oh, ouch. One time I did cry because I got on a test, I got the average, and I was like, I got average. Like, I'd rather fail than be average. And then it's so funny that, like, I get later diagnosed with bipolar, and it's like, yeah. Like, that makes sense. I'm, like, on one extreme or the other.
So how did you, after all those years, how were you like, okay, obviously something's more going on. You're going to therapist. You're having all these dark moments. You're having these light flickers. Thank God you didn't commit suicide. Like, those are a lot of really dark moments where it could have been easy for you to stop your story there. And it could have been easy for you to just say, hey, this is the life I lived. I'm over it. What was it like? How did you get to that point of finally getting diagnosed with bipolar?
Yeah, no, that's a great story. So at 29 years old, I don't remember, 2018 or something, I start going to therapy. My husband and I are in couples counseling. I start seeing my own therapist, and I started doing better. Right? Like, okay, like, we're figuring some stuff out. Like, we had a lot of shit go down, and I start doing better, so I stopped going to therapy, and I'm good. And then I fall down again, right? Yeah. I get in the same patterns, depressed again, and then I had gone to therapy a few times, and then I always quit when I'm better because I'm better. And then I keep falling down, and I just think something is wrong with me. But this time, because I was still in couples counseling, I called my counselor again. I said, actually, I don't think I'm ready to be done. Some other stuff happened. And then we noticed this pattern. And she goes, I want you to see a psychiatrist. And, they have you fill out all these intake forms, and it's very clear I have PTSD, like, all over the map. And he goes, has anyone ever talked to you about bipolar disorder? And I was like, oh my gosh, well, guess what? One time I quit my job and spent all my money on getting my hair done just because I wanted to go out one night. So yeah, I've definitely thought I've had bipolar disorder. But everyone's it's like, no, it's just the trauma. And he's like, you can have two things at the same time, right? Just because you have one mental health issue doesn't mean you're like immune to all the rest of them.
Right.
It's like, oh, that sucks. Can't it
Can we
mean
just
that?
pick one?
Yeah, like, gosh, don't tell me I have 2 things wrong with me. And so he goes, I think he's like, oh, I had been put on antidepressants. That before this, when I started seeing a therapist, I get on antidepressants, and they helped for a while, and then they just like don't help at all. And so he's asking me about these antidepressants, and I'm just thinking he's going to give me an antidepressant again. It's not going to work. And then he's like, I want to try you on a different medicine, and it's actually used to treat bipolar disorder. And I was like, really? Okay. Start treating it. It takes a really long time to, I think it takes about a month to really
Get all the effects in.
get all the effects in, and you have to like taper in slowly. In that month, I hate using this word, but I basically had a mental breakdown in this month. Like, I was not functioning at work. I had a friend where I worked, and I would like be like lunchtime, and I'd be like, I can't do this. I'm like crumbling. I'm like crying in the cafeteria. This was when I got really suicidal. This was only like 3 years ago. Really, really suicidal, and just thinking, I don't want my kids to know that their mom committed suicide, but I don't think I'm helping anybody in my family. Like, I'm a net negative to the people around me. Mm-hmm. That's a really hard spot to feel. People talk about suicide, and there's this notion that it's selfish, but there's usually, something way deeper going on where people aren't in their right minds. And for the most part, you almost think that that's the right thing. You almost think that's the selfless thing to do. It's twisted, right? It's sad.
It is twisted, because a lot of people, that I have encountered in situations like this, they feel like a burden.
Yeah.
And that when you're not being a active member of society or an active member to your family, and they're the ones always taking care of you, and they're the ones always there to help you, and they're, all of these things, burden starts coming on.
Yeah.
And you say, well, I'm not only going to help myself, but I'm going to help them.
Yeah.
And I'm going to alleviate the problem.
Yeah.
And by alleviating the problem, then that's when you start going down the road of taking the next step. Okay, how am I going to make this, happen? How am I going to take my life? And, to anybody that's listening, like, I hope you're not a burden. Like, there will always be people out there to help you. It seems that both back-to-back podcasts have talked about, suicide prevention and awareness. Yeah. And there are people out there that want to help you, and there are resources out there.
Lots of resources. I know there's Idaho finally got their own suicide hotline. Yeah. We were the last state, which is so sad.
And we are one of the leading states in suicide.
Yeah.
Yeah. So crying at the cafeteria, what happens after that?
Yeah, so I ended up like starting to call people too, right? And I didn't have any plan to kill myself. I just knew, like, I was pretty sure that, and then I was like starting to talk about it just like kind of nonchalantly, just like, I just don't feel like I should like be here. And, and then I had a few friends then my friends started talking, like, have you talked to Veronica recently? And, yeah, she did not sound great. Okay, I'm worried about her, and so I had two girlfriends come, they just showed up at my house, and they just handed me a phone, and they were like, we're calling your counselor, and you're calling the suicide hotline. So they called my counselor. My counselor talked to Wade, my husband, and which ended in me like taking a week off of work, probably needed longer, week off of work, getting anything dangerous out of my house, and me just not getting out of bed, and calling my psychiatrist, calling my counselor, having, emergency sessions and things like that, and getting on a medicine that was a little bit more fast acting as well. Because when I went to get on medicines, I wasn't in crisis, and then, by the time it within the month that it was going to start helping, became in crisis. And it was really clear that I had a manic episode. So bipolar type 2 is, there's more than two types of bipolar, but bipolar type 1 is what you kind of see in the movies where people are depressed or they're like super manic, where they're shopping a lot, going out and gambling, quitting their jobs, like doing like really grandiose things. And bipolar type 2 is almost just like shifted on the spectrum where it's more on the depressive side. So that's why I had been misdiagnosed with depression and PTSD for over 10 years, or 12 years, a long time. And then the highs aren't as high. And actually for me, most of the time I have what's called like mixed mania. So I have the depressive symptoms still, but the energy, which is actually the most dangerous spot to be in, right? And it's where a lot of the suicides happen for people in that state. So I was, super hyper, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus, had racing thoughts, but they were all bad thoughts, right? And so it's this, what they call, a mixed episode. And I was in the middle of a mixed episode. So it really was just like, let's keep Veronica safe until some of these medicines kick in. And that was a really scary, dark place in my life. And that was almost exactly 3 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
So from that, how long did it take you to get out of that? So, you had the people around you, you had the safety nets, you had a plan, you had the people, you were doing everything that you needed to do. When did it finally start kicking in and you were feeling better and you're like, okay, I can do this. This is my life now. Like this is who I am.
Yeah. Well, I was really, really grateful because I'm telling you in detail this episode, but I had really a lot of episodes like that throughout my life. And that's why I kept, talking about falling down and stuff like that. And so I remember being really grateful that I had a reason, because now it's like, now I know part of the reason why I'm going through this, and now I can address it. And now we have a plan, right? We have a plan. I started feeling really hopeful that I had a plan and I wouldn't be like this again. And I will say I have not, since I've been on medication and been aware of my bipolar and seeking treatment, I have not fallen back that far again.
Good.
Yeah. And I haven't had any suicidal ideation in probably 2 years. So, it took a long time to get the medicine ironed out. I've now been on the same cocktail of prescription drugs for probably just a little after COVID hit. We tweaked them again. So, a year and maybe a year and a half, I've been on the same regimen. So really, really doing well and really stable there.
So besides the medications, what kind of, because it still comes down to you and you still have to look at yourself in the mirror and you still have to make those choices and those healthy coping mechanisms. And I know that you're on a road of sobriety.
Yeah.
Was that along because you're like, hey, I'm not doing drugs, I'm finishing college? Like these were the things that you were telling yourself, and we were like alluding into your bipolar and depression and PTSD, like bad. We have coping skills and we have bad coping skills and we have healthy coping skills. And so what are you doing now as a healthy coping skill mixed in with that sobriety in your life? Like,
yeah, no, that's great. So, the end of 2020, I quit drinking once in like 2018 for a few months. I said I wanted to quit drinking for a year and just see how I felt. And then I lasted 3 months and then thought, you know what, I feel really good. My relationship with alcohol has totally changed, so I'm going to start drinking again. And I will say, I have binge drank, but I can also not drink, and I can also drink in moderation just fine. So and then the end of 2020, I decided to take another break too. And it was about a little over 3 months for the end of 2020 that I just didn't drink alcohol. And then started drinking again. And then 2 months ago, I decided, like having some more fall downs, always falling down, having some more fall downs and just thinking, okay, what can I do? Because I had been doing really, really good for a really long time, like 7 months. I had been doing like really, really good. And then just kind of fell flat on my face again. And so thinking, okay, what could I do different to stop falling down, to stop hiding who I am, to start feeling my feelings and actually processing them through instead of just holding them in and then lashing out, to stop being codependent, to start asking for my needs to be met, to start getting these healthy coping skills instead of just falling back into the old patterns. What can I do differently? And, it's like, oh, go to counseling. Okay, I've been doing that for 4 years. Oh, journal. I do that every morning. Exercise. Yeah, I do that 3 times a week. Get outside. I do that when it's not freezing. I get really bad seasonal depression, but that's a different story. And then I just thought, okay, when have I been doing the best? And when was I doing the worst? The times I've been doing the best, I haven't drank alcohol. And I don't identify as an alcoholic or on the spectrum of that. I know there's a lot of different ways to view that. But I have enough mental health stuff going on that I don't need to confuddle my brain anymore than that.
And a lot of people don't know that alcohol is actually a depressant.
And it gives you anxiety.
It gives you anxiety. People want to mask and help depression, and people want to mask and help their anxiety by alcohol. But that itself, that combination of structures is a depressant. So when you already have depression and then you're drinking, you're just going further down in your tunnel.
It's so funny because you're like, oh, I just had a terrible day, or I'm just so stressed. I just need a glass of wine to just calm down and relax. Then I realized, like, because I'm always like, I feel like I'm always up here, right? Like, I am a lot. Like I said, I'm crying over. I have all my emotions are big emotions, so it's really nice to just wind down and have wine and actually have that more depressive, right? But I realize all my emotions are so big because I hide them from myself. And so they're screaming, hey, process us.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, no. And so now I'm trying to process these things. And I did a really good job of processing it when I quit drinking in 2018. I did a really good job of processing it when I quit drinking in 2020. And so I'm like, okay, I should take another break and really process this. And so I decided to take another break. And then I thought, why don't I just take a permanent break and then just always process my feelings? And it sucks. No, it's really good, but it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
I was just texting a friend last night. She's like, she stopped drinking too for a little bit. And she's like, wow, you really have to feel all the feels. I'm like, yeah, it's some bullshit, isn't it?
Yeah. But it's what nobody really teaches you how to do.
Yeah. And you don't even realize, even if you don't have a drinking problem, because so many people can drink just fine, and you still are numbing a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I always had a rule to not drink when I was sad. My mom's an alcoholic, and that's one of those things where I've looked in the mirror and said, my daughter's never going to ask me to stop drinking, and my kids are never going to see me drunk. Like, I have some really strict rules because of that. And I've always been like nervous, and people are always like, you're not your mom, right? You're going to be okay. But still, I feel better when I don't drink, both physically and mentally. And I'm more authentic when I'm not drinking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more aware of all of the shit in my life, which is hard, which is really hard, but it's really good.
It's hard, but it's healthy for you.
Exactly. Now my husband can be like, what's wrong? And I'll be able to answer instead of like, I don't know. No, I'm fine. Oh my gosh, all the time.
Yeah.
No, I'm fine. And then all of a sudden I blow up. It's like, oh, turns out I actually wasn't fine. I just been lying to myself for the last 3 weeks, right? And he always sees it before me. He's like, red flag. And I'm like, I'm good. Just keep trucking along doing the same old things, and then all of a sudden fall apart. And so he's tired of seeing that.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's like, you know, he's such a trooper. He's stood by me through so much. But so now I'm like, when he throws a red flag and says, hey, something's going on, now I can actually figure it out. I have like more of the mental capacity to do that.
Yeah.
So I started an Instagram page.
Yeah. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So really excited. I started an Instagram page. I called it Boise Sober Life, and just like, it's like, because every sober Instagram is a huge thing.
Yeah. There's lots of cities on there. I was actually looking at it the other, so many different cities in the U.S. have like what you are starting.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then just a lot of other people individually too. So like, huge movement on social media for these younger people that don't look like alcoholics, which is so stupid because you think of like the bum with the paper bag, right?
Right.
But just these like normal girls like me and you, and you know, early 30s that just stopped drinking because they had problems with it. But everything I read is like on how to stop drinking and all these things are just like written for people who really struggled. And I'm like, well, I'm not an alcoholic. Like I can't, they're like, when you can't moderate, just don't drink. I'm like, I can moderate. So why should I not drink if I can moderate, right? And my why wasn't the same. And so I looked and looked and looked all over for other people that had this, and there wasn't really anything that I found. And so when there's something that you want in the market and it doesn't exist, go make it, right?
Yeah.
And so I just like on a whim just started this Instagram page and wanting to show like the reasons that I don't drink and the ways that I don't drink, without this big why of it's going to ruin my life and I'm going to get a DUI and go to jail, right?
Right.
Or something big like that. And then 5 days later, Sober City Movements reached out to me and was like, hey, we have all these cities that are, connected. We don't have Boise. Do you want to be our Boise rep? And so changed it to Sober in Boise. So Sober, the letter N, Boise. That's the Instagram handle, and also have a Gmail, soberinboise@gmail.com if anybody wants to reach out.
Yay.
But it really just highlights me not drinking and really just like normal social settings. And so probably isn't for like recovering alcoholics, right? Because I go to bars and just don't drink. And when, if that's triggering to you, like don't do that. If that's a triggering page for you, don't follow me. Like take care of your sobriety, how you feel fit. But it's really more just like, guess what? I just went to a huge happy hour with my coworkers on Tuesday. And everyone's drinking and I'm not, and I had a great time. And so, like finding mocktail recipes, finding sober places that you can go to sober, because you can socialize sober. Did you know that? It's crazy. It is crazy. And then like all of a sudden I'm like looking at my hobbies and I'm like going out with friends. I'm like, well, what do you do when you go out with friends? Well, you have a few drinks. It's like, shoot, okay, like happy hours. And it's like, wait, I can do all those things sober. I'm going to document this. I'm going to show the world that you can do this stuff sober. So it's for, anybody who, if you're just a DD that night, if you're pregnant, if you just aren't drinking, you're going to go run a marathon the next day, or, just you're doing what was the one that was on the 75-day hard?
Oh, the 75
challenge?
hard, yeah.
Yeah, like if you're, you're like detoxing or something like that.
There's other options.
There's other options. And, so whether it's you've never drank in your whole life or you're just not drinking that one day and you want to know what are things that you can do or places you can go that really accommodate that, and how do you navigate that socially? That's kind of what the page is about.
And I feel like people, when they're not drinking, they just order water. They're like, I'm not drinking, I'm just going to get water. And it's like, you can still have that fun tasting environment. And a lot of places locally, I mean, have honey in it, have local, drinks and all of that kind of stuff. It's like you can still enjoy a good drink without the alcohol.
Never underestimate the power of a fancy glass with a lime.
Because
anything in a fancy glass, all of a sudden you're part of the gang, and you don't feel like nothing's worse than like all my friends getting like rosé all day and like these fancy, wine glasses, and they're like, here's your water in this plastic cup. And like, can you put it in a wine glass? They're like, huh? I'm like, no, literally put my water in a wine glass. And they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then, because, and, I could go on and on about, now that I'm more sober and like running this page, I can go on and on about big alcohol and how it just like, conditions you to think that you cannot have fun without it. But you can. I mean, you don't have to if you like. I have no problem with people who drink. I'm not telling anybody that they should stop drinking. Well, I mean, unless they really need
unless it's a problem.
Unless it's an intervention, but then I will say that in an intervention. But, you know, like I'm not judging anybody who drinks. My husband drinks, all his family drinks, you know, like all of my friends still do. And I just want to show people that you can still be around that and not partake yourself, and you're not going to miss out on life. Like I was just writing something that I'm going to post later of you don't have to have alcohol to have fun. Like you're a fun person.
Yeah.
You're enough.
Yeah.
You're enough without it. You don't need it.
Yeah.
You know? And if you want it, that's fine too. But, you know, you don't need it.
Yeah. Do you think that with this page, it's also helping you process a lot of things?
Yeah.
I mean, because you just talking about that of like, you are enough. Like you're reaching to those people out there that, you know, are like you. And you made that comment of like, when you search in the market for something that's out there and it's not, you make it.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, I was like, holy cow, light bulbs just came on. Like, this is why I did this podcast.
I was about to say, that's exactly what this is.
Yeah. And
right?
and sometimes I am that person where I just jump off the ledge. Like, I'm like, oh, am I bipolar? Because it's just like, I have a feeling, I have a gut feeling, like this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow my heart. And then people are like, well, why are you doing that? And it's like, you just summed it up. It was like, because nobody else is.
Yeah. And I want that.
And if
someone else was doing it, I'd probably just go follow them.
Yeah. And if I'm searching for it, somebody else has to be searching for it.
And let me tell you, I've been searching for a podcast like this for a long time.
Oh,
just to hear normal people, not people that like you have to write a book to be heard.
Yeah.
You know, like, or you have to run this huge company for someone to want to talk to you.
Yeah.
You know, it's been so nice listening to this podcast and just hearing people that just like live in my community.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Yeah.
Thank
you for that.
Yeah. So I'm glad that it exists. And hopefully, you know, and if no one else gets any value out of that Instagram page, like I'm having a great time. And it really is helping me process some of these things. It's reminding me, I'm more telling myself too, you know, like I don't need a drink at a happy hour.
Yeah.
I can go do all these fun things that I've always wanted, that I used to do, and just not drink. And yeah, so it's like the social lubricant, you know, is really realize I use it as a crutch. And I'm an extroverted person, right? Both of us are. So I'm like, wait, I don't need it, right? And then I can show up as myself, and I still say the stupidest shit.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, sometimes you and I don't need alcohol. We still say stupid shit, and we still do stupid shit.
And I still fall down, and I still dance, and shit, sometimes I still even like end up throwing up, you know, like somehow, and, you know, like I could do all these things sober. And then I don't have an excuse. So later I'm like, sorry, I was too myself.
And that's not a bad thing.
No.
That's totally not a bad thing to be yourself, to know you're enough, to continue life. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast, to be able to share your story, to be able to, you know, talk about how many times you have fallen down, but more importantly, you keep getting back up. And every time you keep getting back up, you find another resource, you find another tool, you find another outlet to help you for the next time. Because reality is that we know
there will be a next time.
There will be a next time.
I'm never going to make it to that point B, that finished product, right? And thank God, you know, life is just finding new problems to solve, really. And it sucks that, you know, maybe it will never be just like calm and peaceful and just perfect, but yeah, that would probably get boring too, you know? So.
Well, thank you. So you talked about how they can find you on social media for Sober in Boise.
Sober in Boise. The letter N, Sober, the letter N, Boise.
Okay. Anywhere else we can find you and get
I have
in touch with you?
another Instagram page that's more of like mental health, and it's Sunday Night Likes. So at Sunday Night Likes, or Gmail, soberinboise@gmail.com. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming on. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you again next week for another podcast. Thanks, guys. Thank you for tuning into the show today. Your feedback is very important to me. If you could leave a review as well as follow me on Instagram at rawthoughts.podcast and email in at m.rawthoughts@gmail.com if you have any guest suggestions.